What if I told you a band from one of the coldest corners of Canada showed up in a big city with barely $100, a demo tape, and a misunderstanding, and somehow turned that gamble into 20 million records sold? It sounds impossible, but that is exactly how the story of April Wine begins. In the late 1960s, Waverley, Nova Scotia was not the kind of place where rock stars came from. It was quiet, small, and far away from the music industry. There were no major record labels, no big studios, no agents walking around looking for talent. If you wanted to make it in rock and roll, you usually had to leave. But 4 young musicians believed they could beat the odds. 2 of them were brothers. David Henman played guitar. Richie Henman played drums. Their cousin Jim Henman handled bass. They had the basic pieces of a band, but something was missing. They needed someone who could sing, write songs, and push the group beyond playing covers in small clubs. That person arrived in 1969. Miles Goodwin was a guitarist and singer from Woodstock, New Brunswick. He was serious about music in a way the others instantly respected. Goodwin did not just want to play other people's songs. He wanted to write his own, and that decision changed everything. At the time, most Canadian bar bands survived by playing popular cover songs. Audiences wanted familiar hits, but Goodwin pushed the group in a different direction. April Wine would perform original music. It sounded bold. It also sounded risky. Playing your own songs meant the crowd might not recognize anything. Club owners preferred bands that kept people dancing with familiar tunes. Choosing originality meant fewer gigs, less money, and a harder climb. But the band stuck with it. The name April Wine came almost by accident. It did not come from a deep story or poetic meaning. The words simply sounded good together. Sometimes that is how rock history works. Still, a good name does not create opportunity. Geography still mattered, and Nova Scotia was the wrong geography. By early 1970, the band realized something had to change. They needed to get closer to the music business. That meant moving nearly 800 miles west to Montreal, a city with clubs, studios, and record labels. But here is where the story takes a strange turn. The band had sent a demo tape to Aquarius Records, a young label run by Terry Flood and Donald Tarleton. The reply they received was polite but vague. The label said they would be happy to meet the band if they were ever in Montreal. Most groups would read that as a brush-off. April Wine read it as an invitation. So they packed their instruments, gathered roughly $100 between them, and drove to Montreal. No appointment, no plan, just belief. When they arrived at Aquarius Records in the spring of 1970, the executives were surprised to see 4 musicians standing in the office expecting a meeting. But there was something impossible to ignore about their confidence. They had traveled across half the country because they believed in their songs. And sometimes in the music business, that kind of stubborn determination is exactly what gets you noticed. The label decided to take a chance, but signing the deal was the easy part, because the next few years would test whether this band from Nova Scotia actually belonged in rock and roll. And let me tell you, the road ahead was brutal. The contract with Aquarius Records sounded like success, but the reality was much less glamorous. A record deal did not mean instant fame. It meant work, endless work. April Wine immediately hit the road. Their first major stretch of touring lasted about 5 months across eastern Canada. They traveled with another Canadian group called Mash Mackin, playing anywhere that would have them. Small clubs, university halls, bars where the stage was barely big enough for the drums. Most nights the crowd had never heard of them. The routine became exhausting. Play a set, tear down the gear, load the van, drive through the night, wake up in another town and do it all again. Sometimes the roads were covered in snow. Sometimes they slept sitting upright because there was nowhere else to stay. This was not the rock and roll life shown in magazines. This was survival. But the grind started to pay off in 1971 when the band released their debut album. The record was simply titled April Wine. It was their first real chance to prove that their gamble on original music had been the right move. The album produced a single called Fast Train. It climbed into the Canadian top 40, eventually reaching number 38. By international standards, that might sound modest, but for a new band from Nova Scotia, it was a lifeline. A charting song meant something important in the record business. It meant the label might give you another chance. Around the same time, April Wine got a moment that made everything feel real. On July 30th, 1971, they opened a show for one of Canada's biggest rock bands, the Guess Who. Standing on that stage and seeing a large crowd react to their music was a turning point. For the first time, the dream did not feel like a fantasy. It felt possible. But success in rock music rarely arrives without a price. Only months after their debut album came out, bassist Jim Henman made a decision that shocked the group. He left the band to return to university. The reason was simple and painfully familiar: security. A career in music was uncertain. Touring paid little. The future looked unpredictable. For Jim Henman, the safer path seemed like the smarter choice. His departure could have ended the band. Instead, it forced them to evolve. They recruited a new bassist from Montreal named Jim Clench. He brought a heavier playing style and a more aggressive stage presence. Almost immediately, the band sounded tighter and louder. That new energy carried into their second album. Released in 1972, the record was called On Record. This time, April Wine found something they had been chasing since the beginning: a real hit. The album included a cover of Elton John's Bad Side of the Moon, which gained strong radio play. But the real breakthrough came from another cover, You Could Have Been a Lady. The song exploded across Canadian radio. It climbed all the way to number 2 on the Canadian charts, and even crossed into the United States charts, something very few Canadian rock bands had managed at the time. Suddenly, April Wine was not just surviving, they were rising. But wait, because the next chapter of their story would prove something important about bands chasing success. Sometimes the biggest threat to a group is not failure, it is momentum. Because as April Wine's popularity grew, the pressure inside the band started growing too, and that pressure was about to break the original lineup apart. The success of You Could Have Been a Lady changed everything for April Wine. Radio stations across Canada began playing the song constantly. Concert crowds grew bigger. Promoters suddenly wanted the band on their stages. For the first time, the group could feel real momentum building. But success inside a band can create new problems. Miles Goodwin had slowly become the main creative force. He was writing most of the songs. He was singing the leads. His vision was shaping the direction of the group. That kind of leadership can help a band rise, but it can also create tension among members who once shared equal control. And in 1973, that tension reached a breaking point. During the period when the band was preparing their third album, Electric Jewels, both Henman brothers left the group. David Henman stepped away from guitar, and Richie Henman left the drums. Just like that, the band that started as a tight family project in Nova Scotia had lost 2 of its founding members. For many groups, that kind of split ends the story. But April Wine refused to stop. They brought in drummer Jerry Mercer, a veteran musician who had previously played with Mashmakhan. Mercer was known for his powerful and steady playing style, and he immediately tightened the rhythm section. Around the same time, guitarist Gary Moffat joined the band. His energetic guitar work added a sharper edge to their sound. The new lineup did not just replace the missing pieces, it transformed the band. The music became louder, the performances became more confident. The group started to feel less like a club band and more like an arena rock machine. When Electric Jewels arrived in 1973, it showed that the band had survived the internal shakeup. The album featured songs like Weeping Widow, which became a longtime favorite on Canadian rock radio. More importantly, the band proved something critical. They could survive change. That resilience carried them straight into their most important breakthrough yet. In 1975, April Wine released an album called Stand Back. What happened next shocked the Canadian music industry. The album sold more than 100,000 copies inside Canada. At the time, no Canadian band had ever reached that number before. Stand Back eventually reached platinum status. For a country with a relatively small population, that level of success was massive. Suddenly, April Wine was not just another band trying to break through. They were dominating the Canadian rock scene. But the band was not satisfied with being national stars. They wanted something bigger. They wanted the United States. And getting there would require one of the strangest opportunities in rock history. Because the moment that would open the American door for April Wine involved a secret show by the Rolling Stones. By the late 1970s, April Wine had already become one of the biggest rock bands in Canada. Their records sold quickly, their concerts filled arenas, but there was still one mountain left to climb: breaking into the United States. For many Canadian artists, that step was almost impossible. The American market was massive and crowded with competition. Radio stations already had endless bands to choose from. To succeed there, a group usually needed one big break. April Wine got theirs in March of 1977. It started with what looked like a small charity concert at a club in Toronto called the El Mocambo. The band was booked to perform a regular show. Nothing unusual, just another night on the road. But behind the scenes, something strange was happening. The Rolling Stones were secretly planning to play 2 club shows at the same venue. At the time, they were one of the biggest bands on the planet. Selling out stadiums was normal for them. Playing a tiny club was almost unheard of. So they used a fake name. The band would appear as the Cockroaches. A local radio station helped organize the surprise. They ran a contest asking listeners a simple question: what would you do to see the Rolling Stones live? The winners were told they had tickets to see April Wine. They arrived expecting a regular concert. Then the truth was revealed. They were about to watch the Rolling Stones in a small club. April Wine suddenly found themselves sharing the stage with rock royalty. The atmosphere inside the El Mocambo became electric. Fans were packed shoulder to shoulder. Cameras rolled. History was quietly being recorded. But wait, because this next part changes everything. Those performances were captured on a live album called Live at the El Mocambo. And because April Wine had opened the shows, their name became linked with one of the most famous surprise concerts in rock history. That association gave them something incredibly valuable: credibility. Promoters in the United States began paying attention. Soon, the band found themselves opening concerts for huge arena acts like Styx, Rush, and Journey. American audiences were finally hearing April Wine, and the band was ready. In late 1977, they made a bold move. They added a third guitarist, named Brian Greenway. The lineup now included 3 electric guitars, attacking every song from different angles. It created a thicker, heavier sound that hit crowds like a wall of noise. That new power showed up clearly on their 1978 album, First Glance. One song in particular exploded across American rock radio: Roller. The track carried a grinding guitar riff and relentless rhythm. It climbed into the American top 30 and became especially popular in blue-collar cities like Detroit and Flint, Michigan. Those cities loved hard-driving rock, and April Wine delivered exactly that. But you thought that was big? Try this. Their next album would push them even higher and give the band some of the most recognizable songs of their entire career. And it would prove that April Wine was no longer just Canada's band. They were becoming arena rock stars. Momentum in rock music can feel like a runaway train. Once it starts moving, it becomes almost impossible to slow down. For April Wine, that momentum exploded at the end of the 1970s. In 1979, the band released an album called Harder, Faster. The title perfectly described what was happening to their career. The record delivered some of the most recognizable songs in their catalog. One of them was I Like to Rock, a track built on a pounding rhythm and layered guitar riffs that felt like pure arena rock energy. Another standout was Say Hello, a song that quickly became a staple of their live shows. Radio stations on both sides of the Canadian and American border picked up the album. Harder, Faster stayed on the Billboard album chart for 40 weeks. That is nearly an entire year of steady sales and airplay. For a band that started in a small town in Nova Scotia, it was an unbelievable climb. But wait, because the real breakthrough was still ahead. In January of 1981, April Wine released what would become the biggest album of their career. The record was called The Nature of the Beast. It blended their heavy guitar sound with something slightly more melodic. The result connected with a much wider audience. And at the center of it all was a song that sounded completely different from their usual rock anthems. A power ballad called Just Between You and Me. The track showed a softer side of Miles Goodwin's songwriting. Instead of roaring guitars, it focused on melody and emotion. The gamble paid off. The song climbed into the top 25 of the Billboard Hot 100. But what happened next pushed the band into music history. On August 1st, 1981, a brand new television network launched in the United States. Its name was MTV. The channel played music videos 24 hours a day, something that had never existed before. The network needed content quickly, so it pulled videos from labels around the world. And early in the broadcast that day, viewers saw something unexpected. The video for Just Between You and Me became the 14th music video ever aired on MTV. That moment made April Wine the first Canadian band to appear on the network. Think about that for a second. Before Madonna became a global superstar, before Michael Jackson's Thriller changed music videos forever, before the explosion of British new wave bands, April Wine was already there. The exposure pushed The Nature of the Beast to massive success. The album sold more than 1 million copies in the United States and became multi-platinum in Canada. Suddenly the band was everywhere. MTV rotation, rock radio, arena stages packed with fans. They even appeared at the famous Monsters of Rock festival in England, performing in front of a crowd of 60,000 people. The band from Nova Scotia had officially conquered the international rock world. But success at that level comes with pressure, constant touring, endless interviews, the expectation that every new album must be bigger than the last. And at the center of it all stood Miles Goodwin, the songwriter, the singer, the creative engine driving the band forward. But engines pushed too hard eventually overheat, and the pressure that built during this period would quietly begin tearing the band apart. Success on the scale April Wine reached in 1981 looked incredible from the outside. Platinum albums, massive tours, a hit song on the brand new MTV network. But inside the band, the pressure was building. Every success raised the stakes. Record labels wanted another hit, promoters wanted longer tours, fans expected every new album to be bigger than the last. The machine that had lifted April Wine to the top of rock music was now demanding more fuel, and most of that pressure landed on one person, Miles Goodwin. He was writing the songs, producing the records, and carrying the creative direction of the band. While the others performed brilliantly on stage, Goodwin often felt like the entire future of the group rested on his shoulders. That kind of weight does not disappear when the concert ends. In 1982, the band released another album called Power Play. It performed well enough and included the single Enough Is Enough, which received solid airplay. But compared to the massive success of The Nature of the Beast, the results felt smaller, and the cracks inside the band were growing. Seeking distance from the constant pressure, Goodwin made a surprising decision. He moved to the Bahamas in the early 1980s. The warm beaches and quiet surroundings offered a break from the relentless music industry grind. But that distance also created a problem. The leader of April Wine was now living far away from the rest of the band. Recording sessions became more difficult. Communication became strained. The sense of brotherhood that once held the group together slowly faded. By the time they recorded their 1984 album, Animal Grace, the tension was obvious. Disagreements over the band's direction grew louder. Old frustrations resurfaced. At the same time, the entire rock landscape was changing. Synth-driven pop music and flashy new wave acts were dominating MTV. The gritty guitar sound that defined arena rock in the late 1970s was starting to feel out of place in the new decade. April Wine could feel the shift happening around them. So in 1984, the band made a decision that stunned fans. They announced a farewell tour. The final show took place on July 31st, 1984, in Kelowna, British Columbia. After more than a decade of relentless touring, chart success, and arena concerts, the band stepped away. For 8 years, April Wine disappeared. Miles Goodwin eventually returned to Montreal and released a solo album in 1988. The other members followed their own musical paths. For fans who had packed arenas only a few years earlier, the silence felt strange. But wait, because the story was not finished. In 1992, the band reunited for what was supposed to be a short Canadian tour. The response shocked everyone. Concerts sold out. Fans returned in huge numbers. The reunion led to a new album called Attitude in 1993, which reached gold status in Canada. The band continued touring through the 1990s and 2000s, playing dozens of shows every year. Yet behind the scenes, the years of pressure had left scars. For Miles Goodwin, alcohol had slowly become a way to cope with the stress of fame. Over time, it turned into a dangerous habit. In 2008, he suffered severe internal bleeding that nearly cost him his life. The experience forced him to get sober. Years later, he wrote a memoir titled Just Between You and Me. Revealing the hidden cost of rock stardom, the broken relationships, the exhaustion, the personal battles fans never saw. Health challenges eventually forced him to retire from touring in December 2022. Then, on December 3rd, 2023, Miles Goodwin passed away at the age of 75. With him went the voice and vision that had carried April Wine for more than 50 years. But the music never disappeared. Songs like I Like to Rock, Roller, Say Hello, and Just Between You and Me still play on classic rock radio today.
I like to rock. I like to rock.
For millions of listeners, those songs still sound exactly like they did decades ago. Loud guitars, big melodies, and the feeling that anything might be possible. Because 4 musicians from a frozen corner of Canada once believed they could beat the odds. And somehow, they did.